Section 1.5, Factoring Polynomials. Factoring the greatest common factor of a polynomial. The greatest common factor, abbreviated as GCF, of polynomials is the largest polynomial that divides evenly into the polynomials. If we're given a polynomial expression, factor out the greatest common factor. We want to be able to identify the greatest common factor of the coefficients, identify the greatest common factor of the variables, combine to find the greatest common factor of the expression, determine what the greatest common factor needs to be multiplied by to obtain each term in the expression, and then write the factored expression as the product of the greatest common factor in the sum of the terms we need to multiply by. Example number 1, we want to be able to factor 6x cubed y cubed plus 45x squared y squared plus 21xy. We can see that we have 3 terms. So for step 1, we write out the terms separately. And what we're going to do is break it down into its prime form. 6x cubed y cubed is the same thing as 2 times 3 times x times x times x times y times y times y. 45x squared y squared is the same thing as 3 times 3 times 5 times x times x times y times y. And 21xy is the same thing as 3 times 7 times x times y. So the first thing we want to do is we want to be able to determine, okay, what is the greatest common factor? Well, we can see here that we have 1, 3 in common of all 3 terms. We can also see that we have 1x in common of all 3 terms, and we have 1y in common of all 3 terms, which then gives us the greatest common factor of 3xy. So that's just what we're going to factor out. We're factoring out 3xy into out of these 3 terms. So we're going to write out our greatest common factor here, and then we have our parentheses. And then what's remaining is what's going to be left over. Now, we can either multiply this and figure out, okay, what do you need to multiply by 3xy to get 6x cubed y squared, and we can determine it that way, or we can look at it over here. So what's left over is a 2, an x, a y, and a y, which is 2x squared y squared, and that's what's left over in our first term. Plus, what's left over in our second term? Well, we have a 3, we have a 5, we have an x, and we have a y. When we multiply that together, we get 15xy. And then what's left over in the last term is the value of 7. Now, after factoring, we can check our work by multiplying. So we can use the distributive property to confirm that when we multiply this greatest common factor, we would end up with the result, which would have been what the question was.